Michigan is the hotspot and in the national spotlight for the surge spreading like wildfire. And joining us tonight on 7 UpFront is U.S. Representative Rashida Tlaib for a conversation on this, migrant children, policing, the U.S. Supreme Court. We do have a lot to get to tonight, but first, Representative Tlaib, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Michigan hospitals, they're raising the red flag. We just heard from Beaumont a minute ago. They're flooded with COVID patients. Governor Whitmer begging for more vaccines, with the CDC saying shut down the state. We saw what happened with the governor the first time around, even threats to her life about shutdown. So do you believe another shutdown is necessary from what you're seeing and hearing in your district?
You know, what I've heard overwhelmingly, and today we were briefed by the governor's team, is understanding that we have a new threat or new component of COVID that is so much more contagious. But what we also hear is that people are getting a lot more lax. You know, as we're opening up schools, when you see the contraction of the virus is among a younger age youth and children, and all of it, many of it is related to, again, the opening of schools, and also just not being truly prepared for folks to begin, taking masks, not following CDC guidelines. I think it's so much of a combination of that, but we are seeing overwhelmingly people wanting to get a vaccination, and then people wanting to make sure that they're doing everything they're supposed to do. But again, Glenda, what I've seen overwhelmingly is that people are finding that they get the vaccine, that somehow they aren't going to get COVID, and that's not what the vaccine is. I mean, we're hoping you don't, but we're hoping that it doesn't lead to death, and that's the point of the vaccination, not that you won't get COVID.
Well, let's turn now to the shooting death of Dante Wright by a white police officer. You sent out a controversial tweet calling for no more policing, incarceration, and militarization. We heard from the Detroit Police Chief, James Craig, saying those kinds of comments incite violence toward officers. He called it, quote, disgusting. What do you have to say to that?
Our public safety in our country is not working. We continue to see overwhelmingly distress among our communities when we see these folks getting basically killed, state-funded murders by folks that are supposed to protect and serve us, and with no accountability. And so when I was growing up, I grew up in Southwest Detroit. I went to Detroit Public Schools. I used to have counselors there, nurses, VOTEC, extracurricular activities. All of that has been replaced with police officers. Anger issues, call the police. I see our mental health and our homeless community being assessed by police officers. That's not the kind of society that we want. We need to invest in our communities. Overwhelmingly, when you see $300 million being spent on Detroit Police Department, but only $9 million on our public health, you wonder why COVID is spreading. You wonder why so many of our Black neighbors are getting COVID at a higher rate and not having access to quality health care. It just is not working. People don't feel safe, and we all deserve to feel safe in our communities, not just some of us feeling safe.
All right, well, let's get to the recent trip that you took to the U.S. border and the explosion of migrant children coming into the country. How will these children be cared for? What are you seeing?
So I went to the border with a number of my colleagues, especially from the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And it was a huge difference from what I saw under the Trump administration. So I'm glad that President Biden is leading with compassion and having a much more humane process. I met a young man from Guatemala, 16 years old, about the same age as my son, telling me that of the violence that he was fleeing from. And I said to him, what do you want me to know? What do you want the president to know? And he looked me straight in the eyes with his brown eyes, and he said, I just want people to know I am a human being. And what I know is that as we begin to look at how these are asylum seekers, how can we make sure we reunite them with their family members here? Glenda, many people might be surprised, overwhelming the kids that we saw, close to about 1,000. Majority of them had relatives here in the United States. So trying to reunite them with families and relatives that can love and care for them and keep them safe. That's what I think the Biden administration wants, and that's what I'm hoping we invest more in.
And they are children. They are children. Yeah. So let's talk about the group of Democrats introducing legislation today to expand the Supreme Court to 13 justices. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying she had no intention of bringing that to the floor. What is behind that move?
You know, I think in my district, in 13th district, I hear so many folks talk to me about the unfairness of the stacking of the court, but also just not having access to making sure this very critically important branch of government that makes decisions about our healthcare, makes decisions about our communities, especially immigrant LGBTQ plus communities. And so they want to make sure that it is fair and balanced, that it really is reflective of the voices around the country and not making decisions for just some of the people in our country. And so I am very, very much supportive. I know Congressman Mondaire Jones is very passionate about this because of how it reflects, again, many of the most vulnerable communities. These are decisions, Glenda, that impact acts that we pass every single day here. Even this is a body that even watered down the Civil Rights Act. It can impact our access to voting. So it's important that we have a fair Supreme Court. And I think expanding the court, which has happened in the past, this is not the first time that our country has done it, I think will create a better democracy for many of us in our country.
Well, Representative Tlaib, we had to move through these topics rapidly, but we did want to hear your thoughts on each one. We thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, Dave.